There we go. All right.
Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wills today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
Yeah, I like to people while we're waiting for him to join us. I was ranting ahead of the show. That's why we're a little bit late. And then we are like, "Oh my god, we don't have any space." We've done so many long form podcasts and radio shows that our storage space is actually limited.
We always run out of space.
Yeah.
We can only do 50 hours of content, and then we have to delete stuff again. So
yeah.
Every few months, we have to delete some.
Dude, I'm so mad at Dunkin' Donuts. Okay, like I just want to get this out there. Number one, they went to like a cheese spread, a cream cheese spread, and then a canola oil substitute for butter. And like, I'm a health food freak now. Like I know I smoke cigarettes and drink beer, but like, I really want real food. Okay, and I don't want canola oil spread. And then now they've gone back to butter because I think they must have got bad kind of reviews. But here they are, like now you get butter packets. They don't even put the crap on your bagel for you anymore. Like, what is this? What is going on with this world? It's like shrinkflation, man. It's like all the same thing. They're just cutting back on everything out there. Everything.
Just go to Starbucks, right? Like they have. I mean, I know you're going out to New England. That's Dunkin' country, which I prefer Dunkin' too because they got my massive iced coffees that I like there. But I'm going to Starbucks more because I need to cut down my caffeine intake. But you got the sandwiches there. I know they just microwave them, but they're fine. Like they're decent enough. It's a decent sausage sandwich. Fills you up.
I mean.
Okay, decent's a bit strong. Acceptable. It is an acceptable sausage sandwich. Like it's fine.
Acceptable. I've been freaking out about food lately, as probably a lot of our viewers understand. I've lost some weight in the last year or so, and I've been focusing on this like whole middle of the store kind of stuff. Is like, what does the FDA allow as what is food? Like, I think that they have to set this minimum requirement where we're kind of like, if we eat too much of that stuff and everything in moderation, I get it, right? But if we eat too much of that stuff, we're literally making ourselves sick. And I'm mad at the FDA. I blame the government, Kevin.
Tim, you just gotta not eat too much of that stuff. Like if you eat like 2 bags of Doritos in one sitting, that is not the government's fault. That's your fault if you feel bad eating 2 bags of Doritos in one sitting.
That's a fair point. I mean, it's hard to argue that. That's actually that makes sense. Yeah,
I've done this before. I know from experience, and my wife says, so you can't blame the government for that. The government did not make you eat those Doritos. It's fair.
I'm letting people know that you're Woodrow Wilson's great grandson. Great grandson. Again, like I think they need to meet, the progeny.
Slander.
Slander. Vicious lies. Well, we're late. We should probably get going with the show. I don't know.
So folks who are joining us, we're going to be talking about Julian Assange. He's gone free now. We're going to talk about that. Joe Biden has done something mostly good. We'll talk about it. There's an asterisk, but
that's fair.
And and then we'll talk about the latest Second Amendment case to come out of the Supreme Court, and some more stuff, maybe some nuclear power stuff.
I got a great update from, and this I love this when this happens. And first of all, I have a news story from our friend Patty out there in Facebook world, right? And then also I got an update, something to add to our discussion that we didn't really get to about nuclear power, and I think that it's important that we talk about it. You could spend a few minutes on it just to add to our discussion from last week.
Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely do that. All right. So let's go in like 5 seconds.
All right.
Now, an hour of clarity for exhausted people of our nation mired in toxic partisanship. Left versus right, us versus them. While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wills today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm here, brother. Fresh off the road once again. Spending my days in Lowell, Massachusetts. It's just
Yeah.
an amazing city. Amazing.
It seems like a cool place. At the home base
Mhm.
today, though. So you got
Mhm.
the nice mic, you got the decent internet. It's all gonna be good.
Yeah, it's gonna be perfect.
Yeah, but so we got a few different topics for you folks. We got Julian Assange, who you may know as a journalist slash traitor, depending on how you view him. He's gone free. So we'll talk about him, like what happened, kind of give a slight refresher on what happened, and then talk about some news related to him. He's out. He's heading back to or has already arrived in Australia, I think.
My understanding is he's back home.
Yeah.
The Boeing airliners that he was on did not suspiciously crash into the ocean. He's back home, and
Yeah.
I welcome that. I think there is a reasonable amount of cause for celebration. I think that libertarians have been talking about the fact that Julian Assange was on some level what we consider to be a real whistleblower, exposing the deep, dark underbelly of the war machine, of some of our political malfeasance, some of the corruption inside the DNC and the lack of security. He exposed a lot of things. And he 14 years he's been on the lam, Kevin, I think something like that. 14 years.
No, is like back in 2010 when a lot of this stuff started, where he ended up in the Ecuadorian embassy.
Yeah. I laugh, but it was kind of it was kind of
they gave him asylum for a little while. He was just sort of like hanging out in there until the Ecuadorians kind of are like, we gotta get this guy out of here. Slash pressured by the US to do this. And then he was in a UK prison for several years. And now he's out. So just to do a refresher on who Julian Assange is, if you don't remember, if you're listening, no worries if you don't remember, but basically he was the founder and was running WikiLeaks, which is an organization that was dedicated to revealing information that governments wanted to keep secret, right? Governments and sort of political organizations.
So basically what the platform there was, right? Like he just basically took information from people presented to him, vetted it a little bit, and put it out there for everybody to read, just like Wikipedia. You know what I mean? It was that kind of thing. And as an advocate for more transparency, I think he pointed out the reality is that there is zero transparency. And now this doesn't solve the need for transparency. What happened here, though, right?
I mean, no. It doesn't solve the need for transparency. So in some cases, the ways in which he would get information is sometimes there'd be people who were breaking the law, right? Like, so you go back to the Chelsea Manning thing, right?
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff, Chelsea Manning broke the law to take documentation of stuff the U.S. military was doing in Iraq and elsewhere, and sometimes committing serious war crimes and human rights abuses, and revealed that. So again, Chelsea Manning broke the law, went to jail for it for a while, eventually got her sentence commuted, and WikiLeaks published it, and this is part of what, like, this is going back to like the Pentagon Papers stuff, right? Like, should journalists be able to publish stuff that was obtained illegally, and are they breaking the law if they're soliciting specific information or even soliciting general information that requires illegal actions to get, right? And the U.S. government's take on that was, that person should definitely 100% go to jail. So that's why Julian Assange was threatened with prosecution and in fact jailed, anticipating prosecution in the U.S. for this.
One of the poignant thoughts that I have about journalism, Kevin, is that the goal of journalism is to speak truth to power. And if they are not speaking truth to the power of the U.S. federal government and the U.S. military industrial complex, are they even journalists? Like, the reality is that speaking truth to power is what the romantic notion of journalism is. I think that we've lost that. And I think Julian Assange and Edward Snowden have exposed that is no longer the romanticized notion of, if it ever was, I suppose, because, like the CIA and Operation Mockingbird, you guys,
it's always kind of a thing, but I mean,
Google that stuff, like, it's real,
there are some folks, like, the media is riddled with partisans, some of whom want to see, like, the government grow and expand. They see themselves part of a project to do that. And then some journalists still have that ethos of like, it is our job to expose the secrets of government and demand transparency, or not even demand, like facilitate transparency so that people can make informed decisions about living in a democracy. Right.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
there's people do that. And then Gene on Facebook says he should be lauded as national hero. And also we need to demand transparency and accountability from our government. Yeah, 100%, Gene. And
we can demand it and they can ignore us. Like,
yeah, right, exactly.
That's the reality. You know, we'll demand it, they'll ignore us, and they'll prosecute Julian Assange, and they will threaten Edward Snowden with a lifetime in prison. Like, that's very real, very chilling. And then guys like Seth Rich get wiped off the face of the planet. Arguably, It was a car accident, but I don't know, man. There's no way we're getting the whole story, and there's no way for us to get the whole story.
And some of that's related to like the DNC leaks to basically Julian Assange also got a bunch of information, like email communications between like Democratic National Committee members, including some pretty on the nose discussions about like rigging the primary in favor of Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders.
And look, Donald Trump pointed that out, and there was a certain amount of obviousness about it that I didn't need it to be written down when they start talking about super delegates and stuff like that. I didn't need someone to expose it, but I wanted the world to understand how authoritarian that system was. And we got some fancy equivocations from Debbie Wasserman Schultz at the time. And I'm like, okay, she's admitting it. Like, she's saying it. Why aren't people outraged? Why aren't they like, the Democratic Party is not what they say they are. And I don't know. One of those times where I lost my mind a little bit, brother. You know,
Patricia on YouTube also says they want Julian's sources and how he got the Hillary Podesta emails. He that's part of like kind of what drove like increased persecution of him as well. And part of that was like there's accusations that he is doing this stuff not for the sake of journalism and transparency and openness, but that he's just working on behalf of like the Russian government to stir up discontent in the United States, right? And that like the DNC was like very explicit about that stuff in like 2016. Like, no, this is just all like a psyop.
They were great. Yeah, they built a great narrative. They really did.
Yeah, and like I get it. Like there's some like connections there, right? Like it's not totally unfounded, but also like it's a pretty weak deflection from like the very real criticism that's deserved of the U.S. government in the cases of the war crimes that were exposed, and in the DNC, like, you know, openly trying to rig a primary in favor of their preferred candidates.
Yeah, they're like, hey, you're revealing our secret, you Russian asset. It's like, hold up a second. You know what I mean? Like, hold on a second. You guys are literally doing what they're saying they're doing. You're recognizing that it's a bad plan. And so I think you used a great word to deflect from that. You went to, you're a Russian asset. I'm not saying that they didn't get the money from, I'm not saying that
like it could be like
appreciate that. It's just shut up already. You're just making it into a conflation of issues.
Yeah, I mean, and so I mean, because there might have been something where you know, some Russian hackers like helped him get that thing, but like again, sure, like that is, I can compartmentalize, like that is a thing that like really I think the DNC should be worried about, like, you know, network security, but also you have these things to answer for. He has raised some legitimate questions that are worth discussing, and I think in doing so that is on net good.
I agree, and I want more Democrats to understand the reality of that. Their party, the party of democracy, has a very authoritarian and rigid structure, that they are just as bad as the GOP, and the GOP has a lot. That it's how Donald Trump got through. They have a less authoritarian structure in their primary season. Like that doesn't mean I'm a big, again, like, I always feel like I got to offer that disclaimer of like, hey, look, I still don't like Trump. I still think he's kind of a train wreck. Regardless, I've given him credit for the good things he does. It's just, there's a certain reality that we as human beings are should be dealing with and accepting and being outraged over, to hold these people accountable and to make them tell us the truth. That we're just not getting there. We're not getting there.
Yeah.
You know?
And so just to kind of rag on Trump a little bit too, because he deserves it. Trump advanced the persecution of Julian Assange. His administration did that. In fact, Mike Pompeo was like talking about like assassinating the guy, like
put in plans, worked with the CIA to put plans together to go assassinate Julian Assange. The indictments of Julian Assange happened under Trump, if I'm remembering this correctly. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I mean,
so I know some people are like, oh well, Trump, he would have done it anyway because like he was talking about freeing Ross Ulbricht, and like no, like Trump was on the wrong side of this one, like very much on the wrong side of this one, and Mike Pompeo like just doing, I mean, CIA stuff, right?
Sure. Let's just.
I don't mean that nicely.
Yeah. Well, and let's not forget there was pretty close to unanimous agreement. Like Trump indicted him. Hillary also wanted him drone strike. Like these things are real. Like this guy, they perceive this guy as the menace, not their behavior, not the crimes that they committed, not the problems that were pointed out with their authoritarianism, with the real structures of their party operations. That was a second thought. It's don't give the people this information, you Russian asset. Like that's what they said.
They went after them. And again, like it's so interesting. Like when you dig into this stuff, like some of it, it's like it's a mixed bag, right? Like again, there's some stuff like that, the bombshells. There's some stuff where it's like, oh, it's a lot of the U.S. government operating normally and less corrupt than a lot of other countries. And like, okay, that's good that it's not all bad, I guess. And then
fancy equivocation, but
and then there's some stuff where like people are criticizing for revealing the names of like translators in Afghanistan, and part of the story, as I understood for that, is like the WikiLeaks had asked the U.S. State Department, hey, can you confirm that these are translators in these documents so we can like block these out to protect their safety? And the State Department wouldn't cooperate. That was my understanding of it. Like, hey, we're going to just release this information because we want transparency, but like you can help us protect some of these people by working with us a little bit.
And I'll be honest, like as my pragmatic libertarianism, I was persuaded by the fact that we were putting our assets in danger, that we were putting spies in danger, translators in danger. I was persuaded and slightly annoyed at the overall deal, right? But
I mean, like it's a thing. Like I said, some of it's a mixed bag, and like I don't like translators be put in danger, but also like the U.S. government had a hand in that because like they wanted to get this stuff out there, like the real, like actual criminal activity that was being exposed. And the U.S. government could have said, okay, we as a government governed by the rule of law have an obligation to allow this stuff to exist, but we want to protect these assets, these people whose lives will be in danger. And the government refused to do that. I know Julian Assange went and published this stuff anyway, but like, it's kind of both of them are at fault for that. Let's say I don't like that. I don't like people who put their lives on the line in Afghanistan trying to make a better life over there. That stinks. But
and look, that probably was in fact a mistake on Julian Assange's part. Like he could have, without the State Department verifying their authenticity, could have blocked their names out anyway and just said, look, this is the overall story is more important than this person's name. You see what I mean? Like that would have been a very simple thing for him to do at that time.
That's what I saw. Like he's kind of a mixed bag. Like overall, I think like the mission and like the work that he's done is incredibly important, and also like he shouldn't be in jail for the work that he did. So to that end, though, because again, the U.S. government wanted to prosecute this guy for like espionage, and the Biden administration, to their credit, worked out a deal to make it so that he would just have time served, and he had to plead guilty though, and that's the whole asterisk on this thing.
Sure, that's chilling. That's chilling.
Yeah, he had to plead guilty and admit to the thing that he did being a crime prosecutable by the U.S. government, and then his punishment was time served in the UK prison. Yeah, and then he could go home.
Yeah, right? and look, he still is skeptical of the U.S. government. He didn't want to set foot on official U.S. soil. He went to the Marianas Islands?
He went out way out Pacific,
He's just
not
like,
the mainland U.S. He wasn't
I-
going to go fly to D.C. or something. And
I don't blame him. Allegedly or purportedly that flight cost like $500,000. So
yeah, I
Julian
saw something
Assange
like
has
that.
some resources. His wife, Kevin, this is late breaking news, happened today. Like, his wife thanked the LP National for keeping a spotlight on his case.
Yeah,
She
I
felt
did
that
see
that
that.
was very valuable. I mean, I retweeted it. You know, she felt that that was very valuable. She literally thanked the LP National. And I do think that that is something that we as libertarians do a pretty nice job. I want to find more issues where we coalesce together on. And sure, we all pretty much would like Ross's sentence commuted. We would like Edward Snowden to get, reintroduced to society with no threat of incarceration.
Yeah.
Those are things we would really think that principled people want that information. And I think our government should be afraid of us, not us afraid of them. And they certainly always manage to turn the tables on that.
Yeah. No, it's what Julian Assange did, again, imperfect person that he is, imperfect associations that he has, did fundamentally challenge the power of the state, the concept of the state, with radical transparency.
I love that. That's a good line.
Yeah.
Radical transparency. I may borrow that.
Yeah, I mean, it's what he did, and for that, I think that's why I generally put Julian Assange more on the hero side than on the villain side.
Yeah, I think you and I do a nice job of balancing it out. We see that there was probably a few problems with what he did. I do want to make an admission.
I don't think people need to be perfect though. Really, no one's perfect. Every single person who's done great things, you can find flaws and inconsistencies, etc. What point is that he advanced an important principle, which is that when our governments are committing crimes, it is worth bringing sunshine to that situation. It is worth bringing those to light and letting people decide whether or not the government should be held accountable for those crimes.
You're on a good roll with me. I want to make an admission, and where I grew as a human being in this case. Chelsea Manning, in my original opinion, was an absolute threat to our democracy, was an absolute menace to society. And over the years, I've grown, Kevin. I mean, honestly, I kind of came along with she published a bunch of that stuff on WikiLeaks. She offered that up to Julian Assange. She made him and that whole platform aware of so much stuff that the US government was doing. And I thought that she was a deserter, and I bought into all of the narratives. And I joke about how skeptical I am that I'm almost becoming a cynic, but it's because of things like that the original story that was told was a vicious lie to invalidate what she was doing.
Yeah.
That's a reality. And so, man, I got to deal with myself in that sense. And I wanted it on the radio show because I want people to understand that was an easy trap to fall into, that conservatives buy narratives from the government that protects the government as quickly, if not quicker than the other side of the aisle. We all do it, and I want us all to step out of it. I want us to get away from that. So I thought I'd throw that in there, this mea culpa about how I felt about Chelsea Manning and how that's evolved.
Yeah, I get it. Sometimes, your initial take on it, you read more into it, it ends up being wrong. Been there a bunch too. That's how you grow. That's how you.
It's beautiful, man. It's being human is great. And look, this is actually real. I don't know how much time we have left, but being human is learning, is growing. It is waking up to problems in the world that we could solve if we just I don't know, cared about each other a little bit more, that we didn't empower the government to punish our neighbors over things that are relatively unimportant. If we could get our minds on that, what a beautiful world it would be, brother.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, we do have to head to break. Thanks again, WYSL audience, for joining us here on A Free Solution. We're going to be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. All right.
One of my Twitter bros called themselves an anacro pragmatist. I just loved it. I loved it. I was just like, that's absolutely beautiful. I said, I'm going to steal it. I'm going to try to find a way to use it in a sentence today.
Yeah. So we got a bunch of comments in here, so I'll try to get to a few more of these. Shelly saying like worried that on YouTube, worried about him being assassinated. It's fair.
Yeah, I saw that, and when Shelly posted that, and it almost sent me on a tangent when I was right in the middle of something. But yeah, no, they have a lot. They have a long reach. They have
it could be a thing.
Obviously trained assassins, right? Operatives, they're called.
I mean, it'd be pretty suspicious now, but also Patricia's like he might have been released because he's ill and dying, which is something I understood too, that he's not well.
Yeah.
So I don't know, that would stink. But Gene points out people plead guilty of things they didn't do all the time. That's true, and I think most people understand that. Like, it's not him pleading guilty is not necessarily an admission to the morality or immorality of his actions. It's just something he had to do to get out of jail. It's like, I get it.
When this comes up, especially right now, I think that our conservative friends, especially the WSL audience, and maybe we'll just kind of refer to this. If they find this podcast, I want them to know that what happened to Trump was an overzealous prosecutor overreaching to get a conviction that served them politically. And that has been going on for generations. Okay. That's been going on for generations. Now, wake up. Like, if we overempower the state, that's the result. And yeah, I'm talking about urban areas where poor people and people of color are running into the law over things like marijuana and over things like potentially shoplifting and over alleged violence that they don't have much proof of. They overcharge and deliver these people into the criminal justice system under the threat of spending their lives in jail, spending decades in jail, just to get a conviction to keep a scorecard that gets them reelected. Yep. Like, this is freaking real, people. Like, absolutely real. And so conservatives, Bannon, Trump, you're getting a taste of it now.
Yeah.
Even poor Alex Jones. My God.
Got crushed.
I mean, I don't listen to him often, but when I do, he makes me laugh. B, he's incredibly emotional, and yet, like, if you want to believe in the occult or the existence of otherworldly things, he makes very persuasive statements, and I do want to believe in that. I'm also like even more skeptical about that than I'm about my average politician. But like, I enjoy Alex Jones. Like, he makes me laugh.
He's an entertainer.
Yeah,
and he is. And he has some funny lines too. Like, I get it. Like, it's mixed with like terrible, like bonker stuff too. But like he
absolutely,
he can be a funny guy.
Yeah,
I say the same thing about Trump too. Trump can be a funny guy.
Yeah.
But
Trump is, dude. That was one of the things that I never could convince people of who hated him. Like, some of his jokes are absolutely hilarious, and yet, like, people are like, I don't know, they lose their minds over him. Like, they go too far. It just, like, he's obviously joking. That's obviously hilarious. Like,
no. Sometimes, like, I get it. He's just telling jokes. He's just trying to make people mad, and like, okay, I just let that roll off. There's real stuff to get mad at. Like,
I know, but I don't think that enough people are mad at the real stuff that he did.
Yeah.
And not enough people are aware of the good stuff that he did, the things that were actually incredibly important. So
yeah,
that
a mixed bag.
Definitely
and we'll get to see how he does tomorrow in the debate. It's we're all very excited about that.
If I'm a betting man, Kevin, I'm gonna put, like, I don't know, where do I go to odds? Like, who's gonna decide who wins? I'm going.
Actually, have you seen, like, people are taking bets on whether or not he's going to say like certain phrases? Like, you can bet on whether or not he's going to say fake news or Sleepy Joe. Or...
Yeah. Oh, yes. Honestly, he's got to come up with some new catchphrases for this election cycle, and I think they're going to get rolled out, trumped out tomorrow.
It's going to be a good one. He's going to try to throw Joe Biden off. That's what he's going to try to do.
Well,
It's
I mean, will Joe Biden be on? That's got to be another
I
question,
know
right? Like,
it's gonna be two old men incoherently yelling at each other, and you won't know like by policy substance who wins. It'll just be like who has the better, more confident cadence. Like the actual words don't matter. It's gonna be just like straight nonsense.
it's gonna be an hour and a half of literal gibberish and platitudes that are hard to understand, and people are gonna be fighting over that on
Sure will.
Friday. That's what they're gonna be fighting over. They're gonna be like, "Oh, Trump said this," and then like 1,000 Twitter respondents are gonna be like, "But Biden said that." It's just like, wow, do better, man. I'm just mock them both. Like this is absurd and
100%.
hilarious, but it's absurd.
All right, let's knock out a few more of these comments though, and we'll get back into the show. Gene says Snowden should be lauded as national hero too. Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
And bring this one up from Patricia on YouTube, who says, "Can the LP get behind Leonard Peltier, the Lakota man falsely accused of murder that Robert Redford did a documentary on?" And so he was part of the American Indian movement. I only know a little bit about this. I'll have to do more research on it. I've seen a few people bring it up. I don't know a ton about it.
Yeah,
I'll be honest.
Honestly, I've seen it pop around on Twitter. I never took it seriously. So, based on your comment here, I will do some reading on it. You know, in between chess games and driving to and from Lowell and doing secret project management stuff. Which, guys, I'm learning how to be like a government agent. I'll be honest with you. It's wild.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's gonna turn.
Yeah. Well,
and he's going out to hang out there with Elizabeth Warren. That's what it is. Elizabeth Warren. He's a big fan, you know. And
yeah, no, she's great. Yeah, no, they're big fans up there. Like, look, I will tell you that it is a very regulated market when it comes to certain aspects, and but I've still met a lot of very highly trained professionals, which sometimes think of highly regulated markets as not generating professionals, and I would say that they do feel a little less pressure to produce, but also that they are overall good work ethic, quality performers, and good providers. So I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying meeting people that talk like this, vast, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, 100%. Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. Good, hardworking people in some of those industries. It'd just be, you know, it could be better.
Sure.
So Gino says a constitution designed to curtail the government. Our government ignores the Constitution. Yeah, that's happens all that. What's oh my goodness? I've been trying to think of the guy's name for like 5 minutes now. The guy in the 19th century who was William Lloyd Garrison, who talked about like, well, if the Constitution is supposed to restrain government and it's not doing it, what good is it? I'm not quite there, but
yeah, there's one of those famous Lysander Spooner.
Lysander Spooner. That's who I'm thinking of.
It definitely was like, is the Constitution fit to exist? Because what it actually has done is create and this was even back then, back when he was alive in the 18th century, 19th century. He was like, it's creating the largest government in the world. And here we are now in 2024, and we have to actually accept that the success of the Constitution and individual liberty did, in fact, allow the largest government in the world to parasite.
It's a mixed bag. Could be worse, but
it really is.
It's the Constitution's not foolproof. You only have a republic if you can keep it, as Ben Franklin said.
Yeah, and honestly, even a republic is a form of democracy, and every day I deal with the fact that 51% of the people want to change everything I say and do. And I'm like, does democracy even really work?
Yeah. I mean,
for the 51%.
I always say, I like the William Churchill quote on this, that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others.
And he's absolutely correct. I have a hard time arguing with it. A benevolent tyrant or a disinterested tyrant who can only control so much would decentralize things where we had to come to agreements between towns and stuff like that. Like that would arguably be better, but it's hard to prevent, like you're fond of saying, it didn't reach my brain at first, but local tyranny can be just as bad, you know, and while you may be able to escape it easier, you may not. Like local tyranny may take your life, may take everything you own. Like, so there's still a danger there,
100%. All right. We should go back because we've been talking about 10 minutes now. I'm just looking at time. I was like, oh man, we've been going for a while. All right, so we'll go back in a couple seconds, and we'll talk about the Second Amendment case.
Yeah, let's do that.
Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today, joined by Tim the Freedom Barian O'Connor.
I'm here, Kevin, and look, I want to ask our WYSL audience to find our podcast, join in those discussions with us. I did offer a lengthy explanation about prosecutorial overreach and how it pertains to Trump and how it could help everyone become slightly more aware of it. So I just want to encourage those guys to kind of check that out. But now we're going to talk about something else that's near and dear to our conservative friends' hearts, and that's a Second Amendment case that I don't want to admit it ahead of time, but I'm afraid that I'm going to not sound very libertarian. And
I wonder if we're going to sort of agree on this one.
I have a feeling.
You want to go first?
All right. So what I want to introduce is we just had a ruling from the Supreme Court, right, where a literal domestic abuser, Zaki Rahimi, and who got in trouble for incredibly bad behavior. And I don't know, I kind of want to leave some on the table for you to talk about. But this guy was not necessarily a good guy. He was under an order of protection. He carried weapons and behaved poorly. Now, arguably, the Supreme Court just reinforced the notion that there are limits to gun possession rights. And I have a hard time disagreeing with it, Kevin. What do you think?
Yeah. So, I mean, a couple interesting things about this case. So, just from the legal constitutional perspective, they're going back to Bruin, which basically says there has to be some sort of historical precedent for restricting the right of someone to own firearms, right?
Sure.
And so in this case, they said, and this is really about this individual guy. Don't try to read more broadly into it, but in this individual case, there is a person who is convicted of domestic violence, who has restraining orders on him. It had weapons, yes, and this was something that's gone back to 1994, but the conviction that was still there. Yeah, you can restrict someone's right to own a firearm in that case. And honestly, this is one of the few situations where I'm kind of okay with it. Because there is a very, very high risk of firearm violence in domestic violence cases. It's one of those things where it's very, very correlated. So if you want to actually stop gun violence, the two crimes that are highly correlated with gun violence are domestic violence related crimes and DWIs, actually.
Really?
Yeah. DWIs is which we don't have restrictions in the same way on that, but domestic violence, which is pretty intuitive, and then DWIs, which is I think less intuitive, but has to do more with lack of impulse control. If you're drinking enough, driving a lot, you might make poor decisions when your inhibitions are lowered, right?
Yeah, to offer a version of the other side of this, though, because I'm actually comfortable going there. Yeah. What happens is all too often in family court, the biggest liar and the most aggressive person strikes first, right? And guys, I don't care. That is predominantly women when it comes to family court and exaggerations of the truth. Now, good guys who are not violent have their rights to own guns suspended. Now, locally in our county, they do what I would call a very respectful job of removing people's guns when they're under suspicion and in order of protection. They do a very good job. They cooperate with the person that they're taking the guns from. They help him find someone that they know to hold his guns in the process, where that guy, the person that holds a gun says, yep, I'll make sure he doesn't get to use them. It's fine. but these are his property. They don't seize them. They don't take them. They don't melt them down. They allow a judgment to come through, and they allow the process to work out. Order of protections are easy to get. I don't want to say they're too easy to get, because it's all too often situations do end in violence when it comes to these domestic situations. But there is a reward for inaccurate storytelling in family court. And so that's where it concerns me. That's why I want to say I'm glad that this case got argued out. But I got to go back with it. I'm not completely unhappy with the results.
No, and like what the court really tried to do is to say, like, okay, someone who is I'll quote from like someone who I think is from Cato, Clark Neely.
Okay.
Says that in sum, today's decision walks a sensible line between the government's power to disarm people who represent a demonstrable and demonstrated threat to the safety of others, and the right of people who have not been shown to present a unique risk of danger to exercise their Second Amendment right to armed self-defense. Because they very clearly said, like, don't read too much beyond this. Like, in this specific case, this person had like the right combination of factors where there's a historical and necessary precedent for someone to have a right taken away from them, which the government can do through due process. Like, I think, like, Tim, to the point that you had started to make, like the counter example to that, yeah, there can be false accusations in certain cases, and it is a thing to worry about, because we've talked about this in the context of like red flag laws too. Like, it's definitely a thing to worry about, where this system could be abused to just disarm people out of spite or vengeance.
Correct. Yeah.
Or whatever. And that is a thing to be concerned with. In this court, the Supreme Court ruling tried to make that clear, is that, you know, we're not saying that we should expand this power. We're saying there's a precedent for doing this type of thing, and that is perfectly within the bounds of constitutional law.
Yeah. I'm going to go to, I want to talk about what this guy did a little bit, because it's, and I mean, I'm chuckling, but it's absolutely like horrible. First of all, he had an order of protection against him. He kept or got another gun. He fired it. Okay. First, he assaults his girlfriend.
Yeah.
Throws her, or wife, mother of his child, throws her in a car. There's a witness to the crime. He shoots at the witness. Okay. Threatens to shoot the mother of his child if she reports the incident of abuse. Then, subsequent to that, discharged irresponsibly a weapon at least, I think, 4 other times, like in a car accident that he caused. Like, I will say this, that there's a piece of me that says, okay, one of the things that the government can be effective at is that people go through mental crises, right? And that they need time to get their stuff together. And so this guy was falling apart. He was a menace. And what he's seeking to do is have a piece of his conviction overturned. And that was the violation of the court order for having guns. And he deserves what he gets. That's it. You know?
Yeah.
He was a menace.
Yeah, no, he's causing a lot of problems. And that's like, that is, and I know it's like not, I think most Second Amendment people I know, like, there's some folks who are gonna say no, that any restriction is too much. But like, to me, like, the Fifth Amendment says you can have your rights taken away if there is due process, right? Like, that's the flip side of it. You're supposed to be due process, but you can have your rights taken away under certain circumstances. And I think that's reasonable in this case. Like, I'm not like everyone should be able to get a gun no matter what, like forever and ever. No, like, if you do something where you're hurting people, where you're acting dangerously, where you are unstable to unstable to the point of being a danger to others, then like, yeah, absolutely, I think it's within the bounds of government to take away your right to own a gun.
As much as I hate to say it, but yeah, like, you and I agree that violent felons should not have their gun rights restored without either some sort of proof or some sort of extended amount of time, like that they've recovered from their desire to commit violence. So,
yeah,
With this guy, like I hate to say it, but I'm glad he lost. It was 8-1. Did you catch who the one guy was? I'm guessing it was Gorsuch who said all her
It was
rights are-
it was Thomas.
Oh, okay. All right. Like, look, I still have a fair amount of respect for that position, that this was a procedural conviction that perhaps shouldn't stand, but also, I, I can respect the counter argument there. Not as much as I respect making sure that guy didn't have a gun. You know what I mean? Like this,
Yeah.
people should be punished for that. They should know that it's off limits. Firing a gun randomly during a stop. I don't know.
Yeah, you shouldn't do that. If you're brandishing a weapon, you're firing it like recklessly. Yeah, no, I'm fine with taking someone's gun away, because I didn't want some moron doing that in my neighborhood either.
Yeah,
that stuff can end up through windows, through houses, like
sure,
striking random people. No, it's if you
right,
so the Second Amendment restricts the government from taking away our rights, but also it should be a call for responsibility. It's like a civic duty to rights carry responsibility. I say that about freedom of speech too.
Sure,
you can use freedom of speech in a reckless way. You can use your right to Second Amendment in a reckless way. It doesn't give you freedom from responsibility. There's a duty and responsibility that goes along with having liberty.
Look, the more I argue with that topic, the weirder I get, because without some sort of inherent morality, where do we get this notion that rights and responsibilities are somehow linked? And how do we end up at this point where, I have rights? I do want to take one moment.
Well, no, I mean, okay, I'll just one note on that, because I think there is we do have inherent rights, but also again, if you exercise those rights in an irresponsible way, there is social and sometimes other consequences for the irresponsible exercising of those rights. And so to have a functional libertarian society, or a functional society with liberty, there are going to be some people who abuse that, and you kind of build structures around that. But for the most part, you have a functional society with liberty, you need to instill that virtue. I think is a requirement of a free society, is to understand the responsibilities and virtues of having liberty.
Yeah, John Locke said, right, that my rights extend right up until the point I swat you in the face with an open hand. Well, that's not the exact quote, but it was similar to that.
Yeah.
My rights extend to where I start interfering with your rights. And that's fine, but then if the government compresses us all into a box like New York City, then my rights are abridged by the government, and that still bothers me. I do want to kind of steel man the notion of perhaps this dude was over punished, because everything that he did were crimes that he was probably also convicted of. So on that kind of thing, I would get an argument based on that. I was punished for that already. I was punished for all of those other things, and now you're adding an additional punishment to what I did. But arguably, you should have just complied with the order, and none of this would have happened, right? That would have been a lot easier for you. Probably would have stayed out of jail. Probably would have got his gun rights restored in a much shorter order. So, you're behaving like a fool. And he committed a domestic violent act like that with a witness that he shot at. Okay, you got to forfeit your rights at somewhere. That's due process.
Again, it's there are probably murkier cases out there too, right? Again, I'm sure there will be red flag cases that are going to come up where someone was either legitimately had a mental health issue or was accused of having a mental health issue, and it's not entirely clear how long their right to self-defense needs to be removed from them, if it ever needed to be at all.
Right. No, I agree.
So
I agree. How much time do we have left in this segment, Kevin? Because
we have about a minute left.
All right. So we have some fun things coming up in the next segment. So I hope everybody on the radio show sticks with it and comes back after the commercial break. Don't forget, we're going to have a little bit of an extended conversation. So find our podcast on Spotify. Have I used up all our time?
No, well, not quite, but pretty close. But yeah, the point is, go. We talk about stuff during the breaks. We talk about stuff afterwards. WYSL audience, you're missing part of the conversation. You need to go find our podcast. But on that note, we are starting to run out of time. Thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. Facebook audience, you're getting a taste of what the podcast normally gets. This is I'm normally skillfully editing in the music with fade ins and fade outs.
Honestly, I love it. I love listening to it. So you guys could check out some of the improvements that Kevin adds on our Spotify channel as well. Like it's pretty cool. Other than, do you remember that time when we had that extended conversation with Queeter and like somehow the timing was off? And I was just like, first of all, I love listening to me, you, and Queeter just hash things out. That was a blast. And I'm like, something is entirely wrong because and for a while I thought like, oh my God, like I didn't have any beer. So I was like a nervous wreck and I was screwing everything up, you know? And now I'm like, no, wait.
No, it's totally my fault. I had deleted a couple seconds out of like Queeter's audio without deleting it out of ours. So like it just wasn't synced up and it sounded terrible. I felt so bad. I ended up re-releasing the podcast after.
And it was perfect after that. I remember that.
Yeah,
it was fine.
I just felt so bad, but yeah, I got some editing to do. Kevin quickly checks the timestamp for the edit.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
It's all right. I got it down 43:10ish.
All right, so, perfect. We have to write that stuff down. So coming up in the next segment, though, guys, we got astronauts stuck in space. We've got an update offered to me by a listener of the show about our position on nuclear power. And then I believe, our athletes taking American superiority to the European Union. I love them kids for doing it.
Absolutely.
It's gonna be great.
No, I'm looking forward to talking about that one. So, so we got those topics and more.
Welcome, John.
Welcome, John. Glad you could join us. We'll go back in like a couple seconds.
A free solution.
Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm here, brother. And look, we had a great experience last week. We had a great show. We had a lot of discussion outside of our normal time frame. I don't want to bug the WSL audience too much, but we were talking about nuclear power, and Kevin and I are both kind of big fans pragmatically of nuclear power, recognize that it's dangerous. But one of our listeners last week pointed out the fact that, and it was a very obvious libertarian point that we may have missed, Kevin, that the regulations surrounding nuclear power were written by big nuclear power companies and then codified into law through the federal government. And so what their actual goal is to build the largest, cheapest nuclear reactors possible, which in fact, perhaps may on some level make it more dangerous, right? So our friend Vince basically points out that the Public Utility Commissions and the Public Utilities Holding Company Act are incentivized, right, to develop regulations that encourage large, very large nuclear facilities where the amount of land destruction to get the power away from that, the fact that the nuclear reactor itself is incredibly large, that those things are how the government and big business intermingle for perhaps not the most ideal product. Does that make sense?
Sort of. So I think there's some like details there. Like I get the general concept of like regulatory capture and like an incentive for nuclear power, like companies, which it's a little bit murky there to want cheaper, bigger nuclear power. But here's the thing. One is, so when a lot of these regulations came out, like, because in the like 50s, 60s, and 70s, we were building a lot of nuclear power. The government was heavily involved in this. This was like never one of those industries that was really like fully like a private thing. Like the Atomic
right.
Energy Commission was very pro nuclear power, and they were heavily involved in this from the beginning. And then eventually, you know, it became like part of the Department of Energy and the nuclear what was it, Nuclear Regulatory Committee, like really
Yes.
started cracking on it. And that's how like we ended up with a situation where everything gets like over-regulated in the aftermath of like 3 Mile Island. And the
Right.
reason why everything is like so big is because they're not cheap, right? Like nuclear power has
Oh, they're
never been
definitely
cheap.
not. Yeah,
Never
right.
ever been cheap. And like, but it's gotten so expensive, which again ends up requiring basically massive subsidies to make it work because the regulations made it so expensive. Like it just didn't work that way in this case. Again, I think there's an overshot of caution in the case of nuclear power that wasn't warranted. It was built a lot on fear. So I get what Vince is saying in terms of like how a lot of energy industries work, but in nuclear power's case, it never quite worked that way. It didn't really work like a market. Like maybe it could have, and we'd be looking at things differently in the way that, you know, we have like coal, natural gas,
Right.
you know, even solar. Like again, and I know the government's mixed up in all those things too, but
Yeah.
nuclear is always like a heavy-handed government thing.
That you're saying that government was heavily involved in it, and therefore the regulations that they eventually crafted um
They
step
they
outside of the incentives that Vince was offering. I think I actually
yeah.
what I'm hearing you say was closer to what Vince was saying as I understood it than perhaps how I referred it to you. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, oh, maybe. You know, listen to me, like, yeah, the government create a lot of incentives, like the incentive is for government bureaucracies, not for like generating revenue from nuclear power. Um,
I
so
think Vince would actually agree with that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, it's they're interested in preserving their jobs and creating bureaucracies and networks of bureaucrats to prove that they're keeping us all safe, right?
Right. So based on that model, I think what Vince was trying to the point perhaps, and perhaps I'm not bringing it through right, was that this created an incentive or a regulatory capture situation where the goal was the largest possible nuclear power plant centrally located to maximize revenue. Now, to me that intuitively sounds A, very libertarian to recognize that, and B, where the government is actually creating perhaps not the best system to utilize nuclear power. That's how I
That's true.
that yeah. So I think that it's one of those deals where libertarians get into kind of chopping up details because we're all kind of autodidactic or autistic, as we like to joke. But I think that we're pretty close to recognizing a very similar problem that
Yeah.
but of course, like, and you and I being pragmatic, I'm an anarcho pragmatist, if you will, but that perhaps a government should heavily be involved in double checking when we're building nuclear power plants. Like, we should be making sure that the items spec in the design are what the items are going to be in the final completion. Somehow we would want to ensure those things.
Yeah, I
And
don't
what
know,
I
Tim. Like,
yeah,
you sound like a big government statist. Why
I
can't I
know, man.
just like cobble together a nuclear power plant with scraps I find in the backyard? Like,
I
just
actually
full on
watched
Tony Stark this thing.
yeah,
Like,
I watched a
right.
YouTube video and I was tempted. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I'm just like, I could probably do it. And look, I do think though that if we reimagine these things and that if we reimagine, I do think that, truck sized nuclear power plants are possible. Like, I
Here's the
think
thing.
that they're there. I think that the technology exists on some level already. So I don't know, like, but why aren't we allowing them? And I think that is also government paranoia and gods of scarcity playing
Yeah.
in.
Well, so that like the Advance Act actually does a decent job of helping to make that stuff more possible. Like they're kind of fast tracking some things like that, not just the Gen 4 reactors, but also things like the small modular reactors that are starting to come out, which is great. It's a good thing. Like it's rare that the government makes progress on an issue that I care about.
Yeah.
Cool. Good job. Like Actually, like both parties on this one, except for Bernie Sanders. That guy's the worst. And I think we all already knew that.
Look, he
Sorry,
again,
Bernie fans. I know there's a couple of them in our audience. He voted against it. 88-2 is one of the two.
He still trades in paranoia. They know that about him. The issues that they agree with him on, they are persuaded. I would suspect by our nuclear, our desire to see limitless power for everyone in the world. Like
that's right.
I think they're
Bernie
persuaded
fans,
by that.
Chime up in the comments. Maybe we'll get to those in the after show. But speaking of limitless, unlimited power from nuclear, France, they already have this. And you'll see what I'm going to say. They basically already have this. Almost all of their power is generated by nuclear. Some of it's generated by hydro too. Very little of it is generated by fossil fuel burning sources like natural gas, oil, coal, etc. Now,
that's fine.
I bring this up just because of the absurdity of the government of France trying to implement climate and energy goals in the Paris Olympics. And the way they're doing this, they're saying no one can bring the athletes cannot bring air conditioners. The athletes can't bring air conditioners to Paris. And again, for climate change reasons. Like, I think like they forget like how that works. Like they have nuclear power. They're not generating more carbon with that power. They're just using energy. They have all the energy they want, all the energy they need. It's not making the earth warmer. Just do it. And it's 62% of their power comes from nuclear power.
Gods of scarcity have to signal their virtue, or people won't believe they're garbage anymore. So, well, I'd say, what are our athletes gonna do? I bet they're just gonna.
They're just bringing in. They're just bringing in their.
God
AC.
bless those kids. Get over there and chill yourself down.
No.
You know.
Yeah. Heck yeah, America. Like, no, do your thing. Like, seriously, I'm
American.
Yes. Yeah, like I feel like so patriotic when I'm like, yes, American athletes like do that. Like the French are being dumb and like they deserve to be ignored for their stupid virtue signaling rule because there's no reason to it. There's no reason to suffer. There's no virtue in being uncomfortable in Paris in the middle of summer when you're trying to perform and be one of the or not one of the best athlete in the world. Why would you put yourself in a situation where you need to be uncomfortable, especially when there's not even any climate related impact to it? Like their own stated goal is nonsense. It's just like deprivation for the sake of deprivation. And the people like that disgust me. Like seriously, like I get like actually mad about it. Like there's no reason you need to do that because they want to impose that on the rest of us too. Like
absolutely.
Like totally decoupled from like the actual moral thing of like, oh, we need to do climate change. Like, okay, fair. I get that argument at least. But no, they've decoupled that, and it's just deprivation for the sake of deprivation, being uncomfortable for the sake of being uncomfortable. There's no moral value in doing that. Just run the AC.
Well, there is moral value in purchasing votes from your constituents through emotional manipulation, which the morality of whether it's a positive morality or a negative morality should remain in question, and we should be discussing it more worldwide. All right. Sarkozy is another authoritarian psychopath, period. Okay. Like, and they use positive signals of virtue to enforce notions of scarcity. And a lot of it is false scarcity. They do it on purpose, man.
Yeah. So Macron over there, like, and
did I say Sarkozy?
Yeah, he did. Whatever decade it is. But no,
French,
I mean, and
the French cheese-eating surrender monkeys, bro.
So I'll try to be careful. Like I have friends who are like French. I know folks who are like there, and I just like there's certain things about like their government culture. I do not get. Like I just fundamentally don't get it. And part of it's like that. Like a lot of the government is like that in terms of like, even though the right is like that in terms of how they treat like energy, and like the necessity of like collective sacrifice for the greater good in this situation, even though it's totally unnecessary and also bizarre things like limiting when you can do like sales at stores. Ridiculous.
What is that? That's absurd.
But yeah, no, it's a real thing. Like they can only do sales certain times a year.
It's like
because
Massachusetts having laws against happy hours. Like, what
yeah.
good is that doing?
Oh,
It's
what if some business undercuts another business? Good,
I don't
good, fine.
good. Compete
Yeah,
for
like
my
that helps me as a customer. Like, oh, they're offering me 10-cent wings at 4 o'clock. Great. That helps the business. That helps me. Like everyone wins.
win, 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 win.
So
Michael Scott
that's right.
in The Office. That's a win, 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 win. Where
Yeah,
I win too.
exactly. So no, it's and I know getting a couple other questions about this. Are they allowed to use ice makers? Same map already. Ice isn't much of a thing in Europe. It's really not.
Oh my
So
God.
there's probably
No
not.
wonder.
Yeah, like now if you go there, like it's a very American thing to have ice in your drinks. Like it's just not a thing over there.
They are
So
so
no, they
weird.
probably don't have ice makers either. And again, they're not. Apparently, they're not going to do anything to stop the athletes from bringing the ACs, and which is why, like, even countries like notorious for not using ACs, like the UK athletes are also like bringing ACs in Germany. Is like, so they're all like just going to do it anyway.
Yeah. Well, I am so thankful. I just want to be clear. I am so thankful for 1776 and divorcing ourselves from that whole clown show over there.
That's
My
right.
God.
And so listen, the UK bashing is going to be for next week. So
All right,
like
we
we'll
will do
do a bit of that next week. And we'll talk about our gratitude for being a free and independent country.
Yeah, we do we have time to talk about the Boeing Starliner that is literally like stranded in space and we've got 2 astronauts up there?
I did see a bit about that. So
All right.
you can preview it for our WYSL audience and encourage them. We encourage you, WYSL audience, to find our podcast and listen to that story and more. Because I said we're gonna go on a little bit. We'll go on after the show for just a few minutes and come find us. All right, thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. We'll be back next week. Have a great night, folks. Take care.
So as probably everybody in the world is aware, the Boeing has been having quality control issues, right?
Yeah.
So they created what they're calling a Starliner, and it is a main purpose is to shuttle astronauts from the Earth to the International Space Station, where honestly they go up there and exchange information with Russians. Like I can't believe that that's a possibility, but that's what's going on. Yeah, still a thing where we still get to hang out in space together.
Yep.
And yeah, so arguably they're up in space and they're stranded right now. Can you believe that?
Yeah. Well, so yeah, I did see a bit about this. Although it's sort of like one of those things where like one of their safety checks like failed and they got like 30 more days that they could stay up there or whatever. And they're pretty confident they're gonna fix it.
Yeah. So I just wanted to put that out there. That's something that's like front and center in the news because I mean Boeing whistleblowers who are saying that they're having real quality control programs like have gone suicidal. Like they, it's kind of scary, Kevin.
Yeah, no, there's a few folks who it's one of those things where it's like, okay, maybe it's just a coincidence. One person they committed suicide, another person had an accident, but
Perhaps.
perhaps.
And-
But like Boeing really does have a serious quality control issue that they've had to worry about. Like a lot of people have been whistleblowers have come out and said, look, they just trying to push out stuff quick. They're skimping on projects. They're picking bad vendors to build the components that go into these planes. It's just bad news when you get it right.
Yeah, their quality control issues have apparently suffered. That was the main premise that these whistleblowers were offering, that they are not getting adequate checks on the floor while they're assembling massive, human transportation devices, which is actually amazing technology that we're, airplanes and stuff like that. I don't know. It's an interesting dilemma,
Yeah.
if you will. I did think of a way to explain some of my economic conundrums to you and the our Facebook and Twitter audience, right? If when I was 20 years old, I could buy a six-pack of beer with approximately 17 minutes worth of work, right? I am now 58 years old, and to reflect the lack of improvement and what inflation does to you and how our monetary our time is literally devalued by inflation, right? I'm at approximately 10 minutes to buy a six pack of beer, which is through technological advancements. We lost steel cans. Beer, I don't even know what they're using for ingredients anymore. They mass produce this stuff.
Hopefully, water, barley, and hops. Hopefully.
Sure, but I'm sure that they've created technological advancements in the production of beer that I should be benefiting from on a much greater rate, at a much greater benefit than I'm experiencing.
I mean, you have to work 7 minutes less, so I guess beer hasn't gotten the gains from the improvements in technology, etc. that other products have, like food, other types of food, and things like TVs. And
we have logistical improvements. We have canning improvements. We have longevity improvements. So my beer product should be way less expensive. It should be down to like 2 minutes.
Well, okay. Actually, did you find like an actual stat on this? Because I'm curious, like what it's pegged to. Because the quality of beer has changed.
No, I'm making it up 100%.
But like I would say, like I see now Tim, we got to tweet at some economists. Someone's got this stat out there. Like how has the amount of time necessary to work to buy a six-pack of beer changed over the last 40 years? Like someone's got this. They have this time index for like every other product, like amount of time to buy a steak, amount of time to like run your light bulb for an hour, like etc. Like they got all this stuff.
I should do more research, but I just wanted to like explain my problems with the CPI and the calculations of inflation, where I feel as though I don't feel as though I know that the government is stealing from us.
No,
you know
sure.
what I mean? Like
that's
I arguably would be in favor, and this is where I'm going to sound like a communist, but that UBI on some level is theoretically possible if the government wasn't capturing technological advancement through all sorts of things, the least of which I would call propping up unions, denying technological advancement in production, and like I don't know, that's where I get to. That's where I get to.
No, I mean I want to hit two things quick. One, Shelly, Utica Club Tall Boy, 79 cents, minimum wage $3 an hour. UC is still dirt cheap. So
is it 79 cents for a tall boy though?
It's probably not that. I've never seen a UC tall boy. I've only seen them in 12 packs. I'm sure like closer to Utica, like maybe they have tall boys, but now she's trashing Utica Club.
I don't know. It was a beer that I could get a case of it for like $6, $7.
Oh yeah, no, it's so cheap. It's still cheap. And also like Rochester, we got Jenny, and Jenny's pretty cheap, right? It's kind of
Rochester, but like you get Jenny in Colorado, and it's like la di da.
When I went to Denver, they had a Western New York bar that like. How they got their source of Jenny is like people who go home to Western New York and bring it back to them, so it's expensive there.
That's it's wild. I can remember, Kevin, I was probably 18 and just barely old enough to drink, or I might not have even been 18, walking around the Walton Fair selling Jenny cans for $3 a piece because people from Long Island were up here and they're like, we love Jenny. And I'm like, we don't get this at home. And I'd sell them a beer for $3 and then I'd go buy another six-pack or what. I swear to God, I went home with more money than I went there with. It was I've always been entrepreneurially minded.
Nice. I was definitely going to make another point that wasn't Utica Club related to. I mean, also like, because I want to ask about the quality of beer. Like, I feel like it's more expensive to buy a 6-pack nowadays because you buy a 6-pack of like craft beer and it's like $14.
I know that's insane. That's absurd.
Yeah, or
It's
more.
absurd.
Like, I have definitely spent like $20 in a 4-pack before. I was like,
oh my god, that's
it's
nuts.
really good beer. I really want to try this beer. It seems really good. Yeah, I'll buy it. But yeah, it's some of the craft beers nuts. But anyway,
it's bananas, man. It's bananas.
Bananas.
Yeah.
But I was gonna make another point because you're talking about the government
Stealing technological advancement from all of us.
stealing technology, which they do a lot, like we're talking about some of this on Twitter, and like one of the ways that they do that is like all the advancements that like we should be making in terms of making home prices cheaper. Like if we allowed homes to be built, if we took advantage of like the advancements in like constructing buildings and modular designs, like homes should be getting cheaper, but they're not. They're getting more and more expensive. In fact, when you look at like the overall inflation that is measured, most of that is housing. Like,
yeah, it's irrational. They're breaking the market through regulatory capture, right? Like, you could print houses with concrete, like print it up in a day. Like,
no, there are inexpensive ways to do that. There are inexpensive ways to like make it easier for people to build housing in cities and places where there's demand for it. But like governments, local, state, and national, all get in the way of this and make housing artificially expensive. And listen, despite that, like home ownership rates for Gen Z and millennials aren't all that much different than people who are at the same age.
which is good news. Honestly, I was a little bit surprised by that, and I want to try to take a moment to destroy those statistics, but I haven't had the time.
Yeah, but like it to me, like they seem accurate, and like you listen to folks online, like the loudest voices online are like talking about no millennials own homes, like that's not true. I think that if the government did get in the way, the home ownership rate for millennials and Gen Z would be significantly higher. Like we've just like it's like the wage growth for millennials and Gen Z is like better than it was for some folks in Gen X and in some boomers, not all, but as in people are earning more earlier in life. However, there's other things where government got in the way and has made life harder for those folks that despite the gains to median salary, that it's getting eaten up by other factors. And I know you were trying to make that point, right? Like it's getting eaten up by inflation. It's getting eaten up by rising home prices that make it harder for people to buy homes and own properties and start businesses. And like we would be much more successful. There's some good news out there, but would be much more successful, and people would be more satisfied if the government would step out of the way and stop getting in the way of some of these things for people to be able to advance their life.
I agree. Like, I don't understand the concerns and the overregulation on the building of houses. Like, I do want people to build safe homes. I do want, like, I want that to be a basic requirement, but I don't want size requirements. I don't want lot requirements. I don't want parking requirements. I don't want any of those things. And those things, those virtue signaling style things, are what's one of among the many things that are hindering that. And then there's this other thing that gets me when I want to talk about inflation. And I get to this point where what I want to call platform bias, or we're building on a base, the assumptions underlying our assumptions are always wrong. If you'll indulge me for a moment, did you ever take a geography class? This is going to be weird, but it's actually kind of connected. At any point you're measuring and finding a location and you're trying to map out an area, at any point along that measurement, you're at least in part wrong. And so if let's say you had a map and you're trying to draw a trail that's 5 points long, right? Every point along that map, there's an error distribution associated with where you are. So if you go 1,000 feet, let's call that a factor of 1x. If you go 2,000 feet, now it's a factor of 2x. If you go 3,000 feet, it's a factor of 3x. So you get to obviously the fifth point where it's a factor of 5x. And you have to distribute that error over the map that you're making. So what you end up with is no matter what, other than at your starting point, you're going to be at least a little bit wrong every single time. And hopefully you'll distribute the error to every point down the line. So at least you get an appropriate ending point. That's how I feel we're doing statistics now. We've built it on, especially statistics when it comes to CPI and inflation calculations, that we've built it on a set of errors that we have now accepted as fact without rechecking those facts. Is that too like out there?
It's I don't have the knowledge to prove you wrong on that. I'm not sure that you're correct or not. I don't have the
No, I'm
knowledge to
not.
know, like, is there like a foundational error that like economics is making, or like places like the federal, what's it, Fred? I forget what it stands for, the Federal
Yeah,
Reserve economic data. Like
which I like looking at, right? But go
yeah,
ahead.
like I'm not knowledgeable enough about either stats or economics to know if there are foundational errors that like have biased the results that we're seeing, right? And occasionally, like they will come out and say, like, hey, we've been calculating this certain wage stat wrong, and so use this new wage stat, right? Like, so
Right.
occasionally that will happen, and
That
you try to like,
that sums up the conclusion that I'm trying to point you at pretty well. Like that right there is, we don't know. What I do know is that we are in fact always wrong whenever we're measuring anything, that there is a
oh sure,
certain amount of
was it
error in all of our calculations, no matter what. Like, and when you look at statistics, they always talk about error distribution and things like that. But that is because it could be an error in the way you're asking the question. It could be an error in the way that the question is being answered. There's, so no matter what, when we're accumulating statistics, it is in fact an accumulation of errors that hopefully approximates what we understand to be reality.
yeah,
But
because
what we do know is that at any point on that line, we are absolutely always at least a little bit wrong. And that's what I always know when it comes to
sure,
statistics.
I
And
get it. You know, like I understand the point you're making, but we also can't like assume that everything's completely wrong. Like otherwise, we're just like, well, nothing's real. It doesn't matter. Like because you
correct.
can take it
No,
too
I know
far,
that's
right?
fair. No, I get it.
So
Yeah,
like
yeah,
so then you're just like, yeah, nothing matters, and like there's nothing we can act on, right? Like so we have to
yeah.
like do our best approximation of getting to the truth, and then acting on that truth to like improve society around
Oh,
us. Like
I absolutely agree with that. Where we get our best information from, though, is trend lines, right? So if we look at an inflationary trend line, if we look at a, like with the wage thing they were talking about, if we look at that trend line looks very good. Where we're at on a distinct measurement point, what we do in fact know is that no matter what, that point is kind of wrong. Like, we don't know if it's better or we don't
yeah,
know if it's worse, but we know it's wrong. So just and when I go down this road in my brain and I'm driving in my car, I'm like, I don't know if this is going to make any sense to anybody, but I'm sure as heck going to at least try to explain it, because, but the trend line itself over time will explain to us what in fact actually is going on. And
right. Well,
it's,
when you start like aggregating data in different ways, it starts
yeah,
to like patterns start to be more useful. Like, because I do this sort of aggregation in my work, like in like marketing, right? Because like I
sure.
look at like daily data for certain things. I'm like, this is just a jumbled mess, right? Like, and I can trust that those points are fairly accurate, but like there's no like discernible pattern there. But what if I put it in like a yearly basis, like that's probably too much. But if I put it in like a weekly basis, okay, you start to see some of the patterns that like I
Yeah.
can take action on, right? Like it's,
Yeah, no, that's exactly the issue that I'm pointing at. That patterns emerge over time. And there's always errors in measurement. We could take a look at what just happened in California. I don't know if you have caught this yet, but there was uh last year they came out with some sort of number of, like, they gained 32,000 jobs, right? And now their own labor bureau is saying, "Oh no, we didn't gain 32,000 jobs. We actually lost 10,000 jobs." Or maybe it was more. Maybe it was like 87,000 jobs. I'm trying to remember the specific numbers, but that's also points out what I'm talking about, that no matter what, at any point when we do a specific measurement, there is going to be error inculcated in that number. And I am afraid that those numbers are influenced politically, which in a sense, when you look at California's specific situation, it, you could see the incentive for those numbers to be politicized.
Yeah.
Arguably, that doesn't really provide us with a real solution and can paralyze us, which is absolutely worse. So I get where you're coming from.
It's a like, because I think there are some people who are like that. Like, we can't trust anything, so like, let's
Yeah, I'm
just like
that.
then it's
No,
just all
that's me.
vibes, right?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
but I mean, like, they're like, because you'll like come back though, like even when you get that, and I get that way too. Like, I can't trust that, and I'm not going to look into it. But like,
Right.
you have to pull yourself back. Like, okay, let's get back to like empirical like results, and like to the best extent possible, try to get to the truth and understand what's happening.
Sure.
But there's some people left and right who are just like, it's all vibes based, and it doesn't matter what you tell them. They're just like, man, I don't care what any stats are saying, like, we're the poorest we've ever been. This is the worst country ever. And like the 1% is just ruling us all. On the right are like there's an article that came out that said like we are basically the same as like end stage Soviet Russia. And I'm like, that's a bit much. Like,
that does seem over the top. But when we struggle with hypotheses and statistics that offer us predictability, and we take a look at the actions of our political elite and our I don't know that what they offer us as statistics results in any kind of rational predictability. That to me is where that's why I travel down this wormhole, because I want to be able to like predict the next act and where their actions actually make sense, like they're rational human beings. And so if I apply this level of that they're rational human beings, then I have to question their motives of, do their motives match up with what they're saying? And I think we would probably agree that a lot of times it doesn't seem to be the case. So there's other incentives behind it. There's other motivations behind it. And telling the truth isn't one of them. And so that interferes with our predictability if they're not going to tell the truth. I don't know. And maybe like when I develop philosophical ideas, I start at a point where I want to have a discussion about them. I know that certain things I say won't particularly make sense, even to myself as I say them, but in my brain, they sound really good until I say them.
That's the problem.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at with this one right now.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right. Just trying to check to see if we got any other comments. Well, this one, guy says, why are 200-year-old homes standing and those built in the 70s, 80s, and 90s falling apart? I know. Yeah, survivorship bias, though. It's kind of a thing, though.
Yeah, sure. And I will say that a lot of 100 and 200-year-old homes are absolutely in the ground. Like they're gone.
No, a lot of them have gone away. We just noticed the ones that stuck around, the ones that are really well built. Like I have a 100-year-old home. My house is built in 1920. It's fairly well built. We'll see how many more years I get out of it. And there are some homes that are built in the 70s and 80s that are going to be around 300 years, 400 years. Like they'll be around a while.
Correct.
Most of them won't be.
Yeah, there's absolute principles of building that will make a home last forever. And look, like it or not, location plays a big, huge role in it, right? Like if you build a very nice house on a swamp, it's not going 100 to 200 years. All right, it's just not. All right, but if you build it on a slightly elevated area where there's good weather, slightly out of the sun, but also enough sun to keep it dry, like that house is going to last, especially if they follow good building principles that were available 100, 200, thousands of years ago, so.
Sorry, Florida, you're in trouble. Those conditions are not met. You're just going to have to up that federally subsidized flood insurance some more.
Florida's a goddamn sandbar, bro. Like you don't build on the Outer Banks, so you can't build in Florida. That's just the way it is. Same as Florida, but also like they seem to be like lasting. I don't know.
What people like Florida, I get it. Like I said, I grew up like just north of Florida. My brother lived in Florida for a while. There's a lot. The government in some ways is a lot better than New York. They have no income tax. I get it. It's one of the fastest growing states for that reason. Just fundamentally like not super sustainable from like your home needs to last a long time though.
Right. Also, look, Shelley points out there was a study done at Harvard in the 1950s. They put black men and white men in a pool, and black men couldn't float. So, this is a great example of how you can observe something and draw an incorrect conclusion. You can be like, well, like people with black skin can't float. And what it really is that more white guys had the white guys that they threw in the pool and the black guys that they threw in the pool. The black guys had more muscle, the white guys had more fat. Fat is less dense than water. And so you could come up with it through observational one anecdote at one point, come up with an incredibly wrong answer. So I think Shelley actually gets me. That's what I'm saying. I see
I get like you can totally, I mean, like it's the both intentionally and unintentionally, you can like take data and like, and actually like academia has like this serious problem, especially in like kind of social studies, like sociology and psychology, of like people who are manipulating like their study data to try to reach a conclusion that isn't necessarily backed by the empiric evidence, right? So it's like it's a huge thing where like they're having to retract all these papers that, and there's one like there's a big one that like there's books written about this. I think I read about it in the Cass Sunstein book too, where like if you sign like a pledge to be honest at the beginning of a forum, people are more likely to be honest in that forum. There's a whole study related to it, and it was straight up lies. Like they just made up data on it. Like it is this thing like that got put into government policy because of like this academic research, because they just want to be like famous. They want something like cool and they wanted notoriety. So like it's a thing.
There is
both malicious. That one's malicious and like built out of like, yeah. And then there's accidental stuff where people like just draw the wrong conclusion from the data because they're looking at the wrong thing.
Yeah, and so like probably this should be our last comment of the night, but I question everything, even myself, and why I think the way I do. Thank you, Patricia. Patricia also gets me. Like I'm just saying, like that. There are times when my brain just kind of races in circles, and that's where I'm at. So that's why I kind of wanted to have this rough conversation about, statistical biases, the foundational biases, the building on top of a obviously not obviously wrong, but in every measurement there's an error. So if we build on that error inappropriately without proper techniques, we can come to the Leaning Tower of Pizza, bro. I don't know. That's something I just popped in.
What a note to end on. What's the end there? All right. We should call it a night though.
All right, bro. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, folks. Have a great night. Take care.